That's why he was making those sounds. It's because he was hot. It's not because he was trying to be a great actor. All right, so The Wizard of Oz. I've obviously seen The Wizard of Oz. Anyone who hasn't seen The Wizard of Oz, you need to watch The Wizard of Oz. Obviously, it's film history 101. Like #1 thing you need to watch. I know the story of Dorothy. You know, she finds the Scarecrow, the Cowardly Lion, and the Tin Man. I know that they're supposed to be depicting her family, that she was in a coma. I don't know. I just know they're just different things. One of the things that I've heard about filming was perhaps the hanging of one of the little people. I think that's the proper term now. It's little people. One of the little people was hanging when they was performing the Rose Among Skin. You can see in the background of the original film that they took out. I don't know if that's real. I know it's a conspiracy theory. That's about all I really know about the dark side of the Wizard of Oz, though. This video is by EmpLemon, and is that spelled IMPLEMON? Just making sure I'm saying his name right, or their name right. I have no idea who EmpLemon is. Interesting name. I don't know much about imps. I do know a lot about lemons. But you know what you do when life gives you lemons? You make imps. Roll it.
I could comb away
Bees. Bees.
all I have is stubble without a hat to wear. I could use a brush for hours and clog the drains of showers. If I only had some hair.
Oh. I don't have one of those anymore, so I'm probably gonna die one day.
Downward spiral warning in your area.
Cable, that
Please
is.
remain calm. Do not attempt to flee or seek shelter. Resistance is real.
He obviously has cable because he's old as fuck, yes.
Oh boy, I have a feeling we're not in Florida anymore.
This guy definitely is trying to sell the bald thing. It's on his shirt and he's wearing a bald cap.
Welcome to Green Screen City.
Hey, I've seen you before. You look just like that man behind the curtain.
Oh.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. You were brought here because you wished for your hair back.
He's just trying to bath,
I can
man.
tell where this is going. Are you really doing this again? Were the 4 other times not enough?
Pay no attention to the 4 other ads I've done for this product. I put a lot of work into this one. Just look at all these zany
I need to see that video about
effects.
Depressed Rick. That looks fun.
Wow. You sold out, man. What happened to you? You used to be cool.
You want to know what's cool? Having hair. You should know, considering that pathetic little song you were singing just 2 minutes ago.
Wait,
See, this video
I'm
hits
sorry.
hard. I have this
I was just
receding
being
hairline.
bitter Because I
It's
didn't discover
horrible.
Keeps until it was too late.
Silence! I was prepared to
It's
grant you
it's my love for
90% effectiveness
not
at
myself.
reducing and
I hate
stopping
myself.
the symptoms of hair loss. I was prepared to connect you with an online doctor and have your order shipped right to your door. But now
I'm
your
kidding.
insolence has
I only
made
hate
me
myself
reconsider.
sometimes.
You don't deserve the most affordable FDA-approved hair loss product.
Wait, no. Please save my hair. I'll do anything.
Silence! You had your chance to visit keeps.com/emplemon for 50% off your first order.
Is that a real
But
website?
now,
Let's look that up.
You're doomed to lose
Looking that
all
up
the rest
later.
of your hair and wind up like my cousin, Dr.
The
Oz.
Mask!
I
Smoking.
command you to leave this place immediately.
Oh, what a world! What a world!
The Wizard of Oz is one of the most iconic films in the history of cinema. According to the Library of Congress, it's the single most watched film of all time. Very few
Fact check.
artistic works from the 1930s have managed to persist within the public consciousness. But even now, 82 years later, most of you watching know exactly who these characters are.
Never seen them.
Far less known, however, are the people behind these characters. Principal photography for The Wizard of Oz lasted from October 1938 to March 1939. During these 5 months, the stars of the movie were subject to some of the most horrendous conditions in the history of the American film industry.
Back in my
When it
day,
was all said and done,
we watched
not a
To
single
and
character
From
who
School
set
in the
off down
Snow.
Yellow Brick Road left the land of Oz unscathed.
Private crowd, even harder than England. Rural America is in a desperate plight.
That's not to say that things were much better back home in Kansas. The 1930s
Dust Bowl.
were a period of major turmoil and hardship for the American public. The Great Depression ravaged almost every sector of the economy. While most American industries were struggling, the film industry was booming. To escape from the dread of everyday life, most Americans sought refuge in the cinema. Nowadays, about 1 in 10 Americans have gone to the movies in the past week. In the 30s, however, it was not uncommon for half of all Americans to pay a weekly
Wait,
visit to
are we
the
counting
theater.
COVID?
Hollywood was in the midst of its
I don't think a lot of people
golden
went to the
age, a
cinema
period
during
in which
COVID.
Studios had unparalleled influence over the industry. During this time, the top 8 studios controlled 95% of American cinema.
RK Radio
and no
Pictures.
studio was
RKO
more
Radio
lustrous
Pictures. We're
than
watching stuff from
MGM.
that later.
They were the studio widely considered to provide audiences with the biggest stars and the grandest spectacle. MGM smoked the rest of Hollywood with its unmatched financial and critical success. Across the 30s, MGM films accounted for nearly a third of the nominees for Best Picture, and nearly 3/4 of the total profits generated
Well,
by
guess
all
what?
8 major studios.
Disney's coming for you.
MGM's dominance over Hollywood was due in large part to the strong leadership of its chief executive, Louis B. Mayer, who in 1937 was the highest paid man in America. 1937 also saw the release of one of the most groundbreaking
The Jeff
films
Bezos
ever
of the
made,
30s.
and one of the most successful films of the time to not come out of the MGM system. That year, Walt Disney
Hey, I
released
told you it
his
was
first
coming.
animated feature film,
For you.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Not on you.
The film was an immersive fantasy unlike anything audiences had ever seen, and by the following year had become the highest-grossing film to date. Snow White's record-breaking success inspired MGM to produce a spectacular fantasy of their own. In 1938, the studio bought out the rights to L. Frank Baum's popular children's novel, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and
Oh.
the rest was history. A history that some members of the cast and crew wish they could forget. Unlike
Why?
Snow White, The Wizard of Oz was entirely live action.
Because they
which
both used
presented a
little
series of
people? Is
challenges while
that
attempting
why?
to transform fantasy into reality.
That's the connection?
One of the most iconic scenes in all of cinema is Dorothy waking up in the land of Oz and the film transitioning from sepia to color.
Which
The
I think
official
is an
coloring
amazing
method used
effect.
to
But
develop the film was Technicolor, which required heavy exposure due to the process of splitting the image into different color channels. As a result, the Oz set required an exorbitant amount of lighting, so much so that the temperature on stage often surpassed 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
yikes.
The heat was suffocating, and stagehands frequently had to be carried off stage after fainting.
Well,
The set
they're
lighting was so
obviously
intense
not from
that some
Oklahoma,
actors even
Texas,
claimed
or
to
anywhere
suffer
else where it gets
permanent
100
vision
every
damage.
day.
The exhaustion suffered from the oppressive heat was only magnified by the arduous production schedule. For
True,
6 days
true.
a week, the actors walked into the studio at 4 a.m.
You've been
and
in
didn't
theater,
leave
you know
until 7 p.m.
Yes.
A significant part of each actor's day was dedicated to the meticulous preparation and removal of their costumes. The Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Cowardly Lion
Well,
were
the
one
Tin
of
Man
the
probably
most
got hot.
recognizable trios in
You
fiction.
think?
All four characters were brought to life by the skilled design of makeup artist Jack Dawn. While the costumes presented an impeccable external appearance, conditions weren't so pleasant on the inside. Every morning,
Yeah,
as
that's
the
how I look
Scarecrow,
when I
Ray
feel
Bolger
pretty
would have to
unpleasant
spend
on the
an
inside
hour
as well.
getting his latex and plastic mask painstakingly glued to his face, and every evening he would spend an hour getting it removed. The mask completely covered his facial pores, meaning that he was physically unable to sweat while wearing it. One could only imagine how it must have felt to wear that thing for 15 hours a day.
Yeah.
But Ray Bolger didn't have to imagine. For 22 weeks, it was his reality. By the time
This is where you
filming was
learn from the
complete,
canines and you
repeated
pant.
applications of the mask left Bolger with permanent grooves around his mouth and chin. But considering what happened to some of the other actors, he may have gotten off easy.
Didn't the
Tin
original
Man
guy
was
have a
played by Buddy Ebsen for about 9 days.
breakout of some
That's
sort?
how long he lasted during filming until he was hospitalized from a severe reaction
Okay,
to Tin
that guy,
Man's
okay.
metallic makeup. Ebsen's silver face paint was made out of aluminum powder that would eventually coat the inside of his lungs, nearly asphyxiating him. As Ebsen
Yikes.
sat bedridden under an oxygen tent in the hospital, the studio could not have given him less sympathy. Producer Mervyn LeRoy repeatedly phoned the hospital, angrily insisting that Ebsen return to the set. After 2 weeks out of action, the studio replaced Ebsen with Jack
Fired!
Haley, much like Pete Best getting cut from the Beatles. Buddy
Did they
Ebsen
even-
was
did they
one
compensate
of
him
the
at all?
luckiest men in show business.
You're fired.
Not only was he unceremoniously fired
What?
from what would have been the biggest role of his career, the incident left him with chronic bronchitis. Jack Haley managed to avoid a catastrophic reaction to the aluminum makeup. but it still gave
Go
him
find me
severe
someone who's
eye
immune.
infection that
That's who we're
forced him out of
using.
work for days. The rest of the suit was so stiff that it rendered Haley unable to sit
Yeah.
down or lie down during filming. In order to rest in between takes, he was forced to lean on a reclining board. But despite all the complications it caused, the Tin Man costume may have still been preferable to that of the Cowardly Lion. Burt Lahr's lion suit was
Burt Lahr.
compared to carrying around a mattress. The bulk of the
Oh,
costume
it was heavy, huh?
consisted of a 60-pound lion hide,
Oh.
a real lion hide. Combined with additional padding, some estimates put the weight of the full costume at 100 pounds. Burt Lahr would become drenched in sweat after just a few minutes, and he would frequently have to take off the suit between shots to avoid exhaustion. The prosthetic mask covering his face didn't allow him to fully open
That's
his
why he was
mouth.
making those sounds. It's because he was
Forcing him to
he was
eat
hot.
at meals
It's not
through
because
his
he was
jaw.
trying to be a great
Halfway through
actor.
production, Lahr gave in and sacrificed an additional hour each day in the makeup chair so that he could eat solid food at lunch. As someone who was known by his peers to be a hypochondriac, Burt Lahr was in near constant agony.
That's probably another
But by
reason why he
far
made
the
those
worst
sounds if he's a
costume-related
hypochondriac.
accident during the whole shoot happened to Margaret Hamilton, better known as
The Wicked Witch.
Nowadays, there are lots of ways to make someone look green, but in 1938, the only tried and true method used by Hollywood makeup artists was copper paint.
Yikes.
Copper, of course, is toxic when
Yeah.
ingested by humans. This was known back then, but the studio showed no restraint in applying the copper concoction
Well,
directly
we're
to
just gonna do it
Hamilton's face and
anyways.
hands. Towards the end of production, Hamilton realized that the constant application of the witch's makeup had tinted her skin green, an effect that lingered for months after the job. Wearing the makeup on set was a constant struggle. Once it was on, Hamilton was unable to touch anything without staining it, and required assistance to perform the most basic of tasks. But the
I'm glad I'm not an
struggles of
actor in the
makeup were
30s.
pale in comparison to the accident she suffered on December 23, 1938. When departing Munchkinland, Hamilton was scripted to exit the scene in a fiery cloud of smoke. The first attempt at the stunt went flawlessly, but director Victor Fleming wanted to get a few extra takes for insurance. On the fourth attempt, the pyrotechnics were ignited too early, causing Hamilton to be engulfed in flames. The accident resulted in second-degree burns on the whole right side of her face. The skin on her right hand was entirely scalded off. But before Hamilton could even receive medical attention, she had to slowly and excruciatingly have the copper makeup removed from her freshly burned skin
Yikes.
with rubbing alcohol. Margaret Hamilton would spend the next 6 weeks in the hospital.
No
before
compensation.
returning
You're
to
fired. Get a
set.
new actress.
On her very
Is that what
first
happened?
day back, she was scheduled for the skydiving scene, another stunt involving pyrotechnics. Hamilton adamantly refused to put herself anywhere near fire again and threatened to walk out of the production right then and there. Since the project was nearing completion at that point, the studio acquiesced, and the scene was completed using Hamilton's stunt double, Betty Danko. While filming that very scene, the smoke pipe underneath the broomstick exploded, and Danko was violently flung from the installation. The explosion was caused by the special effects crew coating the pipe with asbestos,
Oh my
another
God.
toxic substance once thought to be an all-purpose wonder material. Asbestos was also used in Ray Bolger's scarecrow suit as well as the snow in the poppy field scene.
Unusual weather we're having, ain't it?
Betty Danko was hospitalized for 11 days with internal damage from the explosion,
Quite
as well as a
unusual weather at all.
2-inch deep gash on her leg. A wound that would never fully heal.
Oof.
It was a hefty toll for a gig in which she earned just over $800. The long-term health effects on Margaret Hamilton were far less known. What is known is that she would go on to develop Alzheimer's later in her life, a condition that has been linked to copper poisoning.
Has any compensation? I need to look up to see what compensation's
In
been given
total,
out for all
6
that, because
performers
that's
on The Wizard
pretty
of Oz
crappy.
faced some kind of serious physical trauma. Not even Toto left the set intact. However, after enough time had passed, many of the actors could look back on the whole ordeal as a bunch of amusing war stories. Most physical ailments are only temporary. Mental ailments, on the other hand, tend to stick with you for life. And out of everyone in the Land of Oz,
Judy Garland?
perhaps none suffered a worse fate than the star of the show, Judy Garland. She was without a doubt one of the most talented performers of the 20th century. Her portrayal of Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz has served as an enduring symbol of youth and innocence. And even though she was never imprisoned by a brutal costume like the other actors, the studio paid no less scrutiny to her appearance. Since the character of Dorothy was envisioned as a prepubescent girl, The then 17-year-old Garland had to constantly wear a tight corset.
Oh yeah, corsets will damage your
innards. That
innards.
was merely one aspect of the studio's efforts to
No
keep
comment.
Judy fit.
No comment.
Garland was placed on a shoestring diet, one that would not provide her with enough energy to complete the arduous filming days. To compensate, the studio kept Garland on a steady intake of amphetamines to keep her working long into the day. The
Wow,
amphetamines
meth her up.
subsequently necessitated the use of barbiturates to prevent Garland from exhausting herself. Years later, she claimed that during some periods she would only sleep 4 hours every 3 days. The fact that she was able to perform as well as she did under these conditions is nothing short of astonishing. By the end of production, Garland was addicted to both drugs.
I figured they're
An addiction that
highly
would last
addictive
for the rest
substances.
of her life. It certainly didn't help that her time as a child star directly contributed to deep-rooted psychological problems. Despite her brilliance as a performer, Garland was always encumbered by major esteem issues. The insecurities began when a 14-year-old Garland overheard the MGM executives referring to her as a fat little pig. This moment completely devastated her self-image and manifested itself as an unobtainable standard of perfection that she spent her whole life chasing. And even though she would wind up becoming one of the greatest performers ever, in her mind it was never good enough. In many ways, Judy Garland was the first tragic child star, an archetype that has sadly become much more common in modern times. Clinical psychiatrist John Linden encountered many such patients while practicing in the Los Angeles area. He observed that premature stardom resulted in many child actors forming severe identity issues. They tended to report a feeling of profound emptiness when they weren't performing, as if they were marionettes whose true selves lacked any sort of meaning. The reason so many young stars end up on the downward spiral is that many fail to develop any sense of individual identity. Some attempt to fill this void with sex, drugs, and alcohol.
It's understandable to go on a spiral if Mila Kunis dumps you. I feel you, man.
Who you are. There exists a tragic irony between Judy Garland and Dorothy, a character who wanted nothing more than to find joy and comfort in a wayward world. Unlike Dorothy, however, Judy Garland never made it over the rainbow. On June 22, 1969, Judy Garland was found dead of an overdose on her bathroom floor. She was just 47 years old. In the years leading up to her death, her increasingly erratic
bathroom heaven, yeah. Yikes.
Sort of morbid spectacle.
At least she didn't die like on the commode.
To reconcile how she could have
I think that's
possibly
the term
been
they'd use
anyone
back
other
then,
than the
commode,
innocent farm
right?
girl from Kansas.
That's what my grandparents say.
Is it?
Yeah.
Hollywood has the remarkable ability to make the wildest parts of our imagination come to life. But the magic of crafting immersive fantasies comes with a very real dark side. Oftentimes it's easy for studios to lose sight of the real-life human beings at their disposal and to end up treating them as, well, marionettes.
Marionettes.
It
Disposable.
would be easy
Fired.
to look back at all the trauma from The Wizard of Oz and chalk it up to a product of its time. Back then, studios could just get away with all of it because if any actor fought back, they would be blacklisted from the industry. But still, even after the studio's iron grip over the industry was broken and actors
if you sued, you couldn't work in any productions for that studio.
It would be naive to suggest that much has changed in Hollywood. The inner workings of the film industry
Harvey
have
Weinstein,
always been
yikes.
an enigma. The history of Hollywood is smeared with talented people guilty of terrible things.
Yikes.
Very rarely do we ever get to discover what truly goes on behind the big green curtain. Out of every scandal that does come to light, we can only imagine what remains in the dark. In the business of telling the biggest stories possible, the smaller stories often get left behind. For 22 weeks in 1938 and 1939, 6 of Hollywood's most talented actors were practically tortured, with many of them experiencing long-lasting and permanent damage to their bodies and minds. The result was one of the single greatest artistic works of the 20th century. The Wizard of Oz was the defining
Was it worth
achievement
it?
for every single person who worked on it.
Probably.
Their
I mean, they're
suffering had
well
directly
known. I don't know.
contributed to the most beloved film of a
Yeah.
generation. It's tempting to dismiss everything you've heard today as an exploitative cash grab from greedy media tyrants. But for MGM, it was never that simple. In 1939, MGM released 41 films in total, premiering a new movie once every 9 days on average.
Wow.
At this time, the studio had no shortage of revenue. What they coveted instead was prestige. Every year, MGM would earmark one production as their prestige film. a project that was never intended to turn a profit,
Trying to
but one that
read all
existed
those, see
for
if I
the
knew any
simple
other
purpose
ones.
of flexing the cinematic might of the studio. From its very conception, The Wizard of Oz was designed as a monument to the single most dominant empire in the history of the film industry.
Oh, 74.
35 years after the film's release, toy executive Marty Abrams was conducting market research on local children and found that 80% recognized the characters of Oz. Today, memorabilia attached to these characters now sell for millions at auction. Over the years, the performers who brought these characters to life have gradually faded from public memory. Their sacrifices ultimately forgotten.
Judy Garland's the only one I really know by name.
Cowardly Lion and the Wicked Witch have managed to outlive them. Such is the ultimate destiny of people in show business. Actors are tragically temporary. Eventually, only the characters remain. Today, it may seem unfathomable that our most popular and celebrated actors will inevitably meet the same fate.
Talk about, I don't
But
know
at
any
the
of
end
those
the day,
guys.
It is art, not the artist, which stands the test of time. Despite the turmoil suffered by the actors on the set of Oz, one has to wonder if any of them ever regretted it. 4,500 years ago, the ancient Egyptians completed the Great Pyramid of Giza, a structure so remarkably
Pyramids,
ambitious that it would
Oz.
stand as the tallest building on Earth until the Middle Ages.
Interesting
For millennia,
segue.
archaeologists found it inconceivable that it could have been constructed by any other means than a massive workforce of slave labor. The pyramid defied our expectations to such an extent that some people believe it had to have resulted from supernatural or
I mean,
extraterrestrial
obviously.
influence. However,
Seen
recent
Stargate?
archaeological studies
That's
have
how it is.
uncovered a truth that is somehow even
Stargate's a
more
history
unbelievable.
book, not
The
a
vast majority of people who built the
sci-fi
Great
show.
Pyramid were volunteers. The ancient Egyptians risked life and limb to participate in something greater than themselves. Their reward for 20 years of deadly backbreaking labor is that we still talk about them today, long after everything they knew and loved ceased to exist. What would you be willing
Oh God,
to
I want to go there and
sacrifice
actually
so
see
that
that.
you could live forever?
Let's just put up for myself.
Since the
That'd be
dawn
cool.
of civilization, mankind has sought the secret.
I want to see the feet sticking out of a house
we
myself.
can only wonder if science or religion will ever help us achieve eternal life. But at the very least, art can get us pretty damn close.
What are yours the stories? Wood Dog.
For the remainder of this video, we'll read all the Patreons of that channel.
Those are all Patreons.
Okay.
I like that Wood Dog name. That's a cool name. EmpLemon's documentary work it's actually really good. It's very educational. I learned a lot from what he had to say about The Wizard of Oz. A lot of things I did not know. He would say things that I kind of knew. Instances would be, I do remember the Wicked Witch having something happening. I didn't remember that it was fire or burning. Like, it's a lot more extreme than what I recall. I recalled the Tin Man having allergic reaction. Didn't realize he got fired and replaced with a new guy. That sucks for him. Definitely not your $825 that the other individual got. But documentary work wise, I think EmpLemon does well. I think EmpLemon's acting at the start I didn't like it as much. Maybe he could work on his acting. He's not looking for an acting career, I hope. And then in 5 years, if I see him headlining a movie and he's doing fantastic, then great job, you perfected your craft. But besides that, man, your documentary work's fantastic. I learned a lot from it. I do realize that for me to be as memorable as them, maybe I need to put on a line suit and walk around in Oklahoma weather during the summer. Then I can truly feel what it's like to be a monumental actor. I think that's what I'm going to do. Get a line suit and wear it during the heat of Oklahoma summer. All right, everyone, that was The Dark Side of the Wizard of Oz by EmpLemon, who obviously is not a lemon nor an imp. He didn't even look impish, but he's balding. If you have any other EmpLemon documentaries, or maybe any other documentaries you think that I may enjoy or have some type of reaction to, go ahead and send them our way and I'll take a gander. Thank you guys. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, like, share with your friends. And if you don't, then we're gonna apply copper paint to you because obviously that's the way to get things done. And then we're not gonna pay you for it.